I'd like to call this meeting to order of the High Point City Council for June 1st, 2020. Once again, we are meeting partly in person and partly by virtual meeting. This is a public comment meeting, and lots of public comments have been received. We'll be getting to those shortly. Before we begin, though, I would ask everyone please to rise for a moment of silence, followed by our pledge of allegiance to the flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A little bit of delay there.
Yep. And before we move on, I want to call the roll so that everyone who might be listening online will know who's here. So just yell out when I call your name. Councilman Holmes.
Here. Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Here.
Councilman Peters.
Here.
Councilman Moore.
Here.
Councilman Williams.
Here.
Councilman Hudson.
Here.
Councilman Jones.
Here.
Councilman Jefferson.
Here.
And Mayor's here, so we're all present, all 9 of us. Remotely attending the meeting are Councilman Holmes, Moore, Hudson, and Jones. All other council members are present here at City Hall. Also attending is our City Clerk, Lisa Beerling, Interim City Manager Randy McCaslin, Assistant City Manager Eric Almedo, and Communication Director Jerron Hollis. First thing on the agenda tonight is the public comment period. We did receive quite a number of public comments, and at this time I would like to ask the clerk to read those comments into the record, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. The first comment we received was from Reverend Frank Thomas. His comments are: Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I am submitting my comments this evening to address something recently shared by Mr. Demko before his unexpected and surprising resignation as City Manager. I believe it has been less than a month that he informed Council of several initiatives under review for possible implementation. He stated that these initiatives were being pursued to advance and foster diversity and inclusion in the city's workforce, operations, and services. I specifically would like to focus on one initiative that would budget for adding a new diversity, equity, inclusion specialist position to the city staff. Having served as an equal opportunity advisor in the Army and one of few African Americans at the director level at Wake Forest University, I know how critically important it is to have such a person in the organization. Not only would this person serve as a watchdog for employees' rights, but they would also provide needed feedback to city leadership, council, the manager, HR director, etc. Although Mr. Demko is no longer serving the citizens of High Point, I believe it would add to his legacy if you did everything in your power to see that his initiatives come to pass. Too many in High Point have felt unheard and underrepresented for far too long. And you have an opportunity to show the entire city that its leaders care about all those who live and work here. I believe if you do not move this crucial initiative forward, you will be sending the message that Mr. Demko's pursuits were in vain. If we are to be a diverse city, we must have diverse policies and procedures in the city's workforce, operations, and services provided. So as you consider the upcoming budget, please do not use COVID-19 or a potential shortfall as an excuse not to rise to the occasion and speak up for the voiceless. They have been silenced for far too long. End of comment. The next comment was actually a voicemail received, and I have a transcript of that call. It's from Dr. Joe Blosser. My name is Dr. Joe Blosser, and I live at 1301 Georgetown Court in High Point. For nearly the last decade, I have been deeply involved in community development efforts throughout the city of High Point. In all the work I do, racial equity is always on the front of my mind because of the differences and the economic opportunities, health outcomes, and political power available to people of different races in our city. Those differences are stark. The city of High Point has trailed the racial equity efforts of our neighboring cities, and it has been to the economic detriment of our entire community. We know that thriving communities embrace the diversity of the residents, and these communities pursue equity strategies like those laid out in the Regional Diversity Initiatives statement by the city. It's not enough to say that we offer equal opportunity. We've done equal opportunity for decades, but because taken as an aggregate, people of different races in our communities start from very different starting places. Equal opportunity is actually just a way to ensure people who identify as white are the ones most able to secure opportunities when they arise. As a city, our health outcomes will improve if we pursue equity strategies like investing in a chief equity officer, developing robust personnel policies that make our city more competitive, encouraging minority-owned business, and insisting on real challenging racial equity training for all employees. For the last several years, I have helped fund and create opportunities for residents in High Point to get racial equity training through the Racial Equity Institute and NCCJ. I think real diversity training helps everyone understand the long history of racism in our country and helps us see that we often participate in racist structures without intending to, and helps us see that we often participate in racist, I'm repeating myself, without knowing that we're doing it, and actually with good intentions to not be racist. But the work of anti-racism requires regular and ongoing training that bit by bit helps us see how all of our actions and policies often perpetuate the very racism we say we want to eradicate. It is my sincere hope that the good people on our council will recognize the good intentions simply aren't enough to ensure real opportunity for all people in our city. While budgets will be tight during the global pandemic, there has never been a more critical time to invest in the work of racial equity because this crisis is most adversely affecting people of color in our city. The small investment on behalf of the city will have huge economic, social, and health benefits that will help us truly become the diverse and vibrant city we're meant to be. Thank you so much. End of comment. The next comment we received was from Dr. Gwendolyn Johnson Green. Good evening. Thank you for an opportunity to share in support of the much needed and long overdue diversity and inclusion initiative for our great city, my hometown, High Point, North Carolina. I am a resident of Ward 5. As a veteran educator, I have a wealth of experience with welcoming change, embracing diversity, and supporting inclusion as efforts to ensure successes for all. As leaders, we should be aware of the fact that change is the inevitable. We should also recognize the fact that change is the only thing that's constant. We are indeed living in changing times. As leaders, we must address diversity's differences as we formulate policies, practices, and principles. As leaders, we must be intentional in our diversity and inclusion efforts designed to be all-inclusive for all residents, constituents, and partnerships. All residents can and should feel ownership in High Point. With the implementation of the above practices, we can and will influence a win-win approach as we work together and move ahead. The expectation is that this most important initiative can and will influence substantial change in our community. So substantial changes will support all areas in our community, especially areas with critical needs. I am grateful for your service to the City of High Point. We must continue to seek and find additional methods, strategies, and practices that work for all. The Diversity and Inclusion Initiative must include non-negotiable core values designed and created in spite of these unprecedented times and conditions our world faces. Creative funding, working with increased diligence and deliberate speed will make this a doable project. Let us survive, strive, and thrive with all efforts to embrace diversity and support inclusion. End of comment. The next comment received is from Shelley Hutchins. As a civically engaged member of this community, I encourage you to support the diversity and inclusion. The historical inequalities that have been allowed to continue through inaction, disinterest, and ignorance need to be examined and corrected. This is an important step on the path towards true equality. Thank you, Shelley Hutchins. End of comment. The next comment was actually from the voicemail, and I have a transcript of the call. It is from David Rosen. Good evening, council, mayor, city council members, and staff, and everyone that's there. It's kind of weird doing this over a phone call, but my name is David Rosen. I'm at 4309 Harding Court, High Point, North Carolina. I am here as a member of the High Point community. I'm also here as part of the High Point Community Builders. High Point Community Builders is a group of men and women, black and white, that are together to identify, to discuss, implement issues of racial equality and issues of that nature. We're part of the YWCA. We've been working together for, I believe, over 6 or 9 months, and I am part of that group. I am also a citizen of High Point, and most importantly, I'm a human being. I'm here to speak on the initiative that's coming forth to council about the possibility of hiring a new diversity officer, and I'm in favor of that on so many different levels. We have a lot of things going on, a lot of great things going on in High Point, with our baseball stadium, with Congdon Yards, with a lot of revitalization, and there's a lot of pros. But there's also a lot of things that have been going on in the city that I think, and we all know, have been pushed under the rug for many periods of time. I read recently today in an article in the paper that one council member wrote, "We have a new council and I was outvoted." We have a new council and I was outvoted. Read into that however you want. I personally don't feel it's a real strong or team statement by a certain council member. Our council needs to be working together, identifying and working together for the needs of our city and moving forward. We have such great things going on, but we need to have the tough talks. We need to have plans. We need to have more than just talks. We need to have a plan and a process in place. I submit to you that this group, High Point Community Builders, works as a liaison between council and city staff and moving forward and having the real hard talks, dialogue, and implementation of processes to identify racial equality in the city. No matter what the color of your skin and your gender or your sexual preference, we are all equal. We need to work together. The time is now. It must happen. I'm here to help, but I challenge this council to work together with the High Point Community Builders, and let's make a difference that's positive. Thank you. End of comment. The next comment received was from Kendall McBroom. Good morning. I pray all is well for you and your families during these trying times. My name is Kendall McBroom, the senior pastor of Turner Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church in High Point. I write this to you days after witnessing virtually the murder of George Floyd and false accusation of Christian Cooper in Central Park. I fully support any and all efforts to boost diversity and inclusion throughout the city, be it through events or in hiring. Our country and state have a checkered history when it comes to accepting diversity and being inclusive. The time is now to better ensure equity and equality through these measures. While there must be great work and investment in this, any initiative that leads us toward a more inclusive workforce and more diverse community and economy will need to start with this initiative. I and the Turner's Chapel Church family look forward to further supporting the City Council in these plans and look forward to fruit it shall bear. Peace and power. End of comment. The next comment is from Reverend Brad Lilly. Systemic racism is both a theoretical concept and a reality. As a theory, it is premised on the research-supported claim that the United States was founded as a racist society, that racism is thus embedded in all social institutions, structures, and social relations within our society. Rooted in a racist foundation, systemic racism today is composed of intersecting, overlapping, and codependent racist institutions, policies, practices, ideas, and behaviors that give an unjust amount of resources, rights, and power to of the problems. Thank you for this opportunity to address this important issue. End of comment. The next comment is from Jennifer LeBeau. City Council, I encourage you to support the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. It is imperative in order to move our city forward in the right direction. End of comment. Next comment is from Susan Fagg. I encourage you to please support the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. End of comment. The next comment is from a voicemail, and this is a transcript of that call. It is from Heidi Majors. Hello, my name is Heidi Majors, Executive Director of the YWCA High Point. The mission of the YWCA is to eliminate racism, empowering women, and promote peace, justice, dignity, and freedom for all. Within the past 2 years, the YWCA of High Point has been convening a group of over 18 organizations and businesses that have been focusing on discussions of racial equity and bringing the conversation forward in our community. We have been working with the Racial Equity Institute and over 170 people, community members, business leaders, representatives from the city, both staff and council, have been trained in the Racial Equity Institute's groundwater and Phase 1 training. Training focuses on the systematic racism and the foundation of systematic racism throughout history. During COVID-19 pandemic, my team here at YWCA has worked with our community members, and we see where the systems are broken. There is not equity for all residents in High Point. Now is the time to make change, and to make change, we must be intentional. The Diversity Inclusion Initiative that the Council has laid out is just the first steps of our government being intentional to have equity for all. It is crucial that the staff on all levels, including the decision makers, are receiving training, it is imperative that policies are being changed and that we expand the opportunity for representation within all of our community to have a voice in the decisions. I urge the council on behalf of the High Point community and the YWCA to be intentional and to continue the implementation, providing resources to support policy change, support a staff position, and foot support training for all levels within the city of High Point. YWCA is committed to be a partner with the city of High Point in continuing this work. Together, we will make our community stronger and the most livable place as the international city. Thank you and have a great day. End of comment. The next comment is from Patrick Harmon. I am writing to express my support of the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative that was recently proposed. This initiative is long overdue in High Point. This type of initiative was begun in neighboring communities years ago, and it is inexcusable that we lag so far behind in striving for equity and opportunity. Racial disparity in accessing and obtaining family-sustaining jobs is endemic in America. It is not just merely due to different educational attainment. A recent Georgetown study found that the median wage for a good job with a bachelor's degree was $75,000 for whites compared to $65,000 for African Americans and Latinos. COVID-19 is exacerbating this racial disparity. 35% of the bottom fifth of earners have lost their jobs, and these earners are more likely to be African American and Latino. The reinforcement of the systemic nature of this disparity is demonstrated by surveys showing 38% of all small business applicants getting payroll protection program loans compared to 12% of minority applicants. Addressing these systemic inequalities must be done with persistent intentionality. System changes do not magically occur. Local government is ideally situated to take the lead as it is largely funded by its residents who have the right to expect its government to support the community as best as possible. Local government is both a large employer and a large purchaser of services and products. Consequently, there are ample opportunities to support a diversity and inclusion approach to strengthening the community. I strongly encourage council to adopt and fund a diversity and inclusion initiative. Do not let the COVID-19 pandemic serve as an excuse for not implementing this initiative that is long overdue. End of comment. The next comment is from Max Loper and Nancy Murphy. Dear council members, racism is the most challenging issue confronting America, a nation whose ancestry includes every people on earth, whose motto is E pluribus unum, whose ideals of freedom under law have inspired millions throughout the world, cannot continue to harbor prejudice against any racial or ethnic group without betraying itself. Racism is an affront to human dignity, a cause of hatred and division, a disease that devastates society. Notwithstanding the efforts already expended for its elimination, racism continues to work its evil upon this nation. Progress toward tolerance, mutual respect, and unity has been painfully slow and marked with repeated setbacks. To ignore the problem is to expose the country to physical, moral, and spiritual danger. The oneness of humanity is a spiritual truth abundantly confirmed by science. Recognition of this truth compels the abandonment of all prejudices of race, color, creed, nation, and class, of everything which enables people to consider themselves superior to others. The principle of the oneness of humankind is no mere outburst of ignorant emotionalism or an expression of vague and pious hope. It does not constitute merely the enunciation of an ideal, It implies an organic change in the structure of present-day society. Therefore, the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative should be of the highest consideration. I ask that funding for this initiative be a high priority. I also ask that leaders of this initiative consult with the citizenry frequently. Thank you for considering this vital and important work. Sincerely, end of comment. The next comment is from Carlina Foster. I have two statements whose outcomes will reflect the willingness of council to take actions to benefit our city while benefiting our underserved populations. In the wake of the inhumane and senseless killing of George Floyd, people across America are hurting, angry, and tired of senseless killing of Black men. As a result, protests are being staged. We experienced a peaceful protest followed by unfortunate incidents of looting and property damage in High Point on yesterday. I, along with Councilman Chris Williams, Cyril Jefferson, Michael Holmes, and Tyrone Johnson, were at the protest at the police station throughout the event until the peaceful ending. This matter is important and sensitive to every community, but especially to the African American community. I respectfully ask that this city government, Mayor Wagner, Police Chief Schultz, to respond publicly about the George Floyd incident and the city's position on due process, equality, and protection for all citizens in our city. The City of High Point's vision is to become the single most livable, safe, and prosperous community in America. To make this vision a reality, all citizens, businesses large and small, must be able to share in the economic prosperity. A disparity study will provide a baseline of data as a beginning step and further ensure that the City of High Point sets goals, recommendations, and practices to make certain discrimination, bias, or inequalities in procurement and contracting with women and minority businesses of color does not happen. It is important as this city continues to move forward with economic development projects that it will address historic inequalities, work to remove barriers and ensure fair opportunities for women and minority businesses of color. This city needs an effective action plan for procuring goods and services from historically excluded and underutilized businesses owned by minorities and women. I ask this council to make a bold and deliberate move to commission a diversity and inclusion initiative that includes hiring a MWBE diversity officer. Thank you. End of comment. This is a comment received actually from a voicemail. This is a transcript of the call. It is from Dorothy Johns. Hi, this is Dorothy Johns, and I'm calling to encourage the City of High Point to support any diversity and inclusion initiative that you possibly can. I did have the luxury of attending the groundwater presentation that was held at St. Mary's, and it was incredible in showing the systemic racism on every level. And I just encourage the city to do everything that they can to dismantle the discriminatory practices that are occurring systematically. Again, this is Dorothy Johns, and if you need to reach me, my email is dajohns@northstate.net. Thank you so much. End of comment. The next comment is from Reverend Daniel Webb. Dear City of High Point City Council, first and foremost, thank you for affording me, as a local pastor and community leader, to share comments regarding support for diversity and inclusion in our city's organization and community at large. Fostering diversity and inclusion is significant because both are interrelated. Diversity demonstrates the valuing and/or respect for individual differences, whereas inclusion involves that of inviting of such individuals' differences into various aspects of the city's organization and community at large, which should be reflective of the populace. When we as a city begin to diversify and include individuals with differences. We are informing all individuals that we are a community that values and appreciates their perspectives, as well as we humanize them as contributing members of our city. To the contrary, when we fail to diversify and include individuals with differences, we as a city are sending them a covert as well as an overt message that we do not value their contributions to the city, albeit such might not be the intent. In that light, please note that I encourage the city of High Point to think carefully about how we want to build a community that is reflective of its residents. To that end, please inform me if you have any questions and/or if I could be of assistance regarding this important initiative. God bless. Romans 8:28. End of comment. The next comment is from James Adams. Good afternoon. I hope this reaches you and yours well. We have for so long been out of the loop in so many areas of commerce, employment, pay, information, and so much more. For this administration to have the desire to speak to diversity and inclusion shows there is hope. The concerns that we all are aware of, time will not allow us to properly present. It is my wish that this council commit time and money to address what's needed. Yes, it will be hard with the physical constraints we are in for, but we must push through. If we come out of this pandemic event the same way we went in relative to diversity and inclusion, our city will continue to suffer, and that will be a cost that we cannot bear. End of comment. The next comment is from Kimberly Campbell. Good morning. I would like to know if the public can virtually sit in on the High Point City Council meeting to be held on Monday from 5:30 to 7. If so, how do we log in? I am asking because I have a concern regarding the speeding that is occurring on the street I live on, which is West Willis Avenue. Thanks in advance for your help and have a great weekend. Regards. End of comment. The next comment is from Glenn Chavis. Mr. Mayor and members of council, I was pleased to read in the newspaper that the dreaded word diversity was brought up in one of your recent meetings. Since I am not allowed to call out a council person by name, I will just say I am not surprised at the response and excuses that are starting to come forth. Since 1859, our local government has catered to those that chose to keep Black people disenfranchised using laws, ordinances, and excuses. In 1915, City Council officially segregated the city by passing an ordinance that prohibited colored people from certain sections of the city. This created three distinct Black communities, East Side, South Side, and Macedonia, which have always been denied equality. In 1925, at the request of a racist health inspector and the health department, City Council passed an ordinance prohibiting any cafe in the city from serving white and Black customers in the same building unless it is divided by partitions and separate dining tables, counters, dishes, and cooking utensils. Segregation and separate but unequal are costly propositions that have and will continue to put a drag on our bottom line. In case you have blinders on, the cost in the past of operating separate schools, libraries, and parks, just to name a few, should indicate to anyone that our local government dug a financial hole for itself, all because of racism. Attempts at keeping one race superior over another are costly and will continue to erode our bottom line unless we learn from our past mistakes, own up to those mistakes, and make changes that will benefit all High Point citizens equally. Council seems to be very quick at finding monies for projects and shortcomings regarding downtown, uptown, but when it comes to fairness and doing what it takes to make High Point great, some of you want to keep finding excuses for not looking at your moral responsibility. This time it's COVID-19. You can get the money to finance one or two diversity positions by simply enforcing some of the many ordinances you have passed but are not enforcing. End of comment. The next comment is from Reverend J. Lee Scott. Dear sirs, I know there must be a cutoff on comments, but Friday being the busiest day of the week, next Monday, I submit the following statement. The ouster of Greg Demko was only the first step in eradicating city leaders who refuse to acknowledge, let alone work with the Black community in High Point. The police chief is another who has turned a deaf ear to our community. Not only has he shut out the voice of our community, but has declared war on our youth. Having been illegally appointed, the chief does not represent the best High Point has to offer. If there is any way that this can get read into the official record, thank you. Reverend J. Lee Scott. End of comment. The last comment we received is from Reverend Joe Blankenship. Dear High Point City Council, I pray you and your families are doing well in body, mind, and spirit. I commend any action the council takes to advance the diversity and inclusion in the city's workforce, operations, and service. The current outline of items being considered reported at the May 4th meeting is excellent. I would add 2 specifics. Number 1, coordination of these efforts with HR should include ensuring that employee discrimination concerns that don't rise to the federal EEO level are adjudicated justly. Number 2, a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist position designed as advisory to the city departments is good. Additionally, I believe this person will experience firsthand the anti-diversity and anti-inclusion forces within our current systems. Therefore, I would suggest this person have the ability to report directly to council should that be necessary. Lastly, I urge the council to seek the wisdom and expertise of the African American community in High Point, as their history with these matters extends farther and deeper than any other constituency or governing entity in High Point. Respectfully, Reverend Joe Blankenship. End of comment.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, having received all public comments have been submitted, move to the Finance Committee portion of the agenda, and I will turn the meeting over to Councilmember Britt Moore, who chairs that committee.
Thank you, Mayor Wagner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The Finance Committee did meet before you. On our agenda tonight is a consent agenda, which all of these issues were discussed in detail at the meeting, and the numbers are there before you, and I will present the entirety of the consent agenda with favorable recommendation for approval.
Okay, there's a motion to approve the finance items as one consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Ms. Peters. I'll now call the roll. Please indicate whether you support or do not support the approval of these items. Councilman Holmes.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters.
Aye.
Councilman Moore.
Aye.
Councilman Williams.
Aye.
Councilman Hudson.
Aye.
Councilman Jones.
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. The consent agenda items are approved by a vote of 9-0. Mr. Moore, do you have anything else for finance?
I do not, Mayor, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now proceed to our regular agenda items, and the first regular agenda item is the presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2021 City of High Point annual budget.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, while Eric is passing out your copies to you, I just want to say, as you can imagine, this has been a very challenging budget, and you'll see the results of that thus far. We spent a great deal of time, and at this time, I'd just like to publicly thank Eric and Bobby, finance director, and their budget staff for the tremendous amount of work that they have put in, not only in what you see here, but what was the evaluation that took place to get us to this point. With that very brief introduction, I'd just like to turn it over to Eric to present this year's budget.
Mr. Almeida, thank you.
And council, before we get started, I didn't realize that the binders are individually labeled, so I didn't get everybody's right. So before you leave, I'll switch them out.
Mine doesn't have to be right.
Yours and the mayor's are correct, but the others are not. As Randy said, as you can imagine, this budget year is very difficult. Been doing this for 24 years, and the amount of uncertainty that we are faced with right now is really the biggest challenge. We are making projections, educated guesses. We're consulting with our peers in other cities. We're consulting with the School of Government, the League of Municipalities, and all other resources to try to guess at what our revenues situation may be with the results of this COVID virus and how that's affecting the economy. But at this point, we're simply making educated guesses. Federal and state aid is uncertain, and we cannot plan on that. We have received some federal aid through FEMA, through the FTA, and from the county for some of our expenditures on COVID. But at this point, there's no replacement of general revenue. So we can't budget what we don't know. We know that we have sales tax declines. We've got some initial figures. We suspect that we'll have lower property tax collections. We know that we'll have slower registered motor vehicle and utility fee collections because of actions by the state to delay those payments to us, so that it's not that we're not going to receive those payments, it's just that they're going to be slower than we anticipated. We put together what we feel is a very conservative budget, but we may need to amend this budget throughout the next fiscal year. We may need to make more cuts, or we may be in a position where we can recommend adding things back in. We will set up a monthly tracking report to City Council and bring back to you at these meetings so that we can review that on a much more frequent basis with you all. On page 3, there we go. We started off this budget with a $7.2 million general fund shortfall. The majority of the shortfall I'm going to talk about today is the general fund, and that is because that's linked to sales tax. We're projecting a 5.2% decrease from current year's adopted sales tax figure. We're getting notices from the state that statewide we're about 7% down for March collections. We were able to get High Points collections, and we're at about 8% lower from last year's number. But we're also about 16% lower than where we thought we would be, because we budgeted very conservatively this year, and we were outperforming what we budgeted. So in total numbers, we believe we'll be about $1.7 million down in sales tax for this current fiscal year, and about $4 million for the upcoming fiscal year. And that is just based on what we're hearing, that the first 3 months of the fiscal year will be down, and we're assuming an upward trend, that the economy will start coming back after the first quarter, our first quarter, from July through September. But again, that's just a projection, and we have to monitor that on a monthly basis. As I said, property tax, registered motor vehicle tax, and utility fee collections, will be lower, will be slower to pay. Looks like utility fees are about 10% at this point, but we're monitoring that on a monthly basis as well.
That's 10% down.
10% down, yes, sir. Licenses and permits in this budget and charges for service are slightly lower. We're seeing, less permits. It's not significant at this point. And we're also projecting lower charges for services because of some of our Parks and Recreation programs that aren't happening, and so there aren't fees being paid for those type of things. And then we're projecting lower miscellaneous income because the Federal Reserve has slashed interest rates. The money that we have in the bank is not earning as much as it was in the past. One of the things that we do include in this proposed budget is a 1 cent property tax rate increase. This would increase the property tax rate from 64.75 cents to 65.75 cents. This would be the first property tax rate increase in 5 years. And the impact of that for a median home value in a High Point that's $147,500 would be about $14.75 annually. We are not projecting or proposing an increase to garbage collection fees, stormwater fees, our motor vehicle fee, or our electric rate at this point. We are in the middle of a rate study with our electric fees, and we will likely bring some rate structure changes back, but we don't, at this point, anticipate a rate increase for residential customers. Just a couple of small other rate increases that we're talking about. Our tipping fee at the landfill has remained the same for quite a while. We've done a study of all landfills in the area, and to bring us more in line with what other landfills charge, we are proposing to go from $36 a ton to $42 a ton at the gate. And then we also are proposing a $10 increase to return check fees. That's to line up with what the state has recommended. They changed that this past year, wanting to maintain that with the state, parity with the state. On the water sewer side, we are proposing a 2% water and sewer rate increase effective October 1. This continues the long-range plan that we've developed with Davenport. We typically would look at about a 4 to 5% rate increase. Given this year and some of the challenges, we thought it was prudent to scale that back to a 2%. This proposed rate increase would keep us close to the median of the 376 water and sewer systems statewide. The rate change for this would be, the average rate increase would be $1.51 per month. The next slide, we have the comparison dashboard from the UNC School of Government Environmental Finance Center. You can see that the median of all those 376 systems is $72.62. Our current rate is $75. We always use this as a metric just to make sure that we're not too far out of what the median is statewide. There were a number of reductions and changes that we have to make in this budget in order to balance the budget, to do our fiscal responsibility and balance the budget. So we'll just go through this list here. The recommended budget does include the closure of the High Point Museum and the reduction in force of 6 full-time and 8 part-time positions. That would have a first-year savings of $550,000. We also are recommending the closure of the Moorhead Recreation Center and a reduction in force of 2 full-time and 1 part-time position for first-year savings of $230,000. As you know, that we've talked about already, we are recommending the closure of City Lake Pool for 2 seasons due to the COVID situation and also the redevelopment of that property. that would have a reduction in force of 32 temporary lifeguard positions, and the savings there would be $106,000. We are recommending elimination of all outside agency funding for a savings of a little bit over $349,000. We are also recommending the elimination of the employee's 401k match and the employee holiday bonus at a citywide savings of $625,000. And we are recommending that we replace the performance merit increase program that we've had for the last several years, which is a 3% average, with a 1% cost of living adjustment that would be administered mid-year in December. We're proposing a targeted hiring freeze. We would review each position as they became vacant and prioritize public safety positions and that type of position, and try to keep positions vacant as long as we can throughout the fiscal year at a savings of $1.16 million. We're proposing that we reduce market authority funding by $300,000. That funding in the general fund is $240,000 a year. We have already held back the final payment for this current fiscal year, so there's $60,000 in the current fiscal year, and then the general fund portion for next fiscal year would be $240,000. We're recommending the reduction of the community development blight reduction program. As you know, this started several years ago at $500,000. We raised it to $800,000, and we're proposing to take it back down to the original budgeted amount of $500,000. We're recommending that we defer the third-year repayment of our Catalyst loan, our Catalyst project loan. When we purchased all the property for the Catalyst project, we did an internal loan from several of our different funds, and we set up a payment schedule. This $443,000 is the annual payment schedule. We would just defer that for 1 year until we can restart that. And then we're recommending several reduction because fuel is historically low cost right now. We typically budget because of the fluctuation in price, so we're going to reduce our fleet fuel budget and vehicle replacement budget by a total of about $50,000. We've looked internally at all our departments and asked all the departments to make reductions to their training budgets. We're keeping a focus on those budgets that our employees have certifications that they're required to make, but citywide we're reducing training budgets by $300,000. There are some cost drivers that were in the budget that we basically can't avoid. We're anticipating a 5.72% increase in health and dental costs, which will be effective January 1. We participate in the local government employee retirement system, and we have a state mandated increase in that contribution from 8.95% to 10.15%, which is about $1 million increase. The new budget does include funding for a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist position. And it also includes 2 apprentice positions in the fleet services department, which is part of the commitment that we've made to the Guilford Apprenticeship Partners Program. It continues our current level of funding for street resurfacing at $2.45 million. As you know, we really need about $4.5 million to kind of stay current. So we're not even funding that at the level that we really should be, but we have raised that up to $2.45 million for the past couple of years. We are continuing the utility assistance program at $200,000. And we've got about $5.87 million in replacement vehicles, which is about 10% of the total fleet. Here, yeah, this gate. And that's about $4 million of that is pay as you go, and then the remainder, $1.8 million, would be through a lease program. On the next page, we just have a list of our pay-as-you-go capital program. This is detailed within the budget book, and we can definitely talk about these investments more at our work session. But we are trying to, in the non-general fund departments, especially trying to continue a healthy level of pay-as-you-go capital. A lot of people would say you need to scale back on that, but actually right now, when the economy is not as hot as it is, it's a better time to do these because you get more bang for your buck. There's more firms that are looking for, that are competing for work. So oftentimes you can get some of this work done for a less expensive cost than you would in other economies. That's the budget in a nutshell. There's a lot of detail in the budget book that we can discuss, and certainly at the work session that's scheduled this Thursday. Our next steps are the work session on Thursday. The public hearing will be held on June 15th, Monday, June 15th, at the regularly scheduled council meeting. We have 2 work sessions scheduled on June 17th and 18th if they're needed to discuss the budget further, and we're asking for your consideration of the budget adoption at a special meeting on June 22nd. As Randy said, this is not a one-person show. We have a lot of staff that works on this. Bobby Fitzjohn, our finance director, Laura Altizer, senior budget analyst, Rosalind McNeil, and Linda Price are our budget analysts, and all our department directors and staff worked tremendously hard on putting together these budgets. This is, as I said at the beginning, this was one of the most difficult I've been involved in. And so with that, we hand it to the city council to consider, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have questions for Mr. Almeida?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
are there any clarification on the June 4th, Thursday's budget review? Is supposed to be 4 o'clock according to the information that I received, and that's what has been noticed. And on the agenda itself, it says 4 o'clock.
Okay, that must have just been a typo. Okay.
So it's,
Can we make that
yes,
correction?
I just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I did want to note for the council members that aren't physically present, and for you all, also, we have all these documents have been uploaded to the OneDrive. The budget document will be uploaded to the website, and will be available for public consumption there.
Eric, we usually get, this is pretty thin, we usually get a breakdown of the expenditures department by department.
That's available in a PDF
Okay, I got you.
on OneDrive.
And under the OneDrive is under budget, right?
I'm not sure if it's under budget or under city council information. I'll have to verify that.
Yeah, I'm under council information now, and I see budget. Maybe when I go to budget, maybe I'm just not seeing it right. I see appendix for fiscal year 20 final report, but I see fiscal year 20 line item detail final report, and I see proposed budget for fiscal year 19-20. I don't see anything for 2020.
I'll verify where that's at right here before we.
Go ahead.
Were there any other questions?
Any other questions for Mr. Almeida? Okay. Thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate it. We'll see you Thursday. I'm sure we'll come armed with comments we've received between now and then, and certainly a lot of questions. So, but I appreciate all of your hard work as well as all the finance staff and the management staff as well. This is by far the most challenging budget we've ever been faced with, and if anybody listening out there has any special connections with Raleigh or Washington, we sure would appreciate some money to fix this revenue gap that we didn't create. So with that being said, next on the agenda, there's nothing else on the agenda except for the approval of some minutes Is there a motion to approve the minutes, or are there any corrections that need to be made?
Mayor,
Yes.
sorry, I really thought the Seaboard had been added to the agenda. There was an agenda memo that was,
Okay, well then then what we'll do, I'll make a motion then, to suspend the rules to add an item, regarding the, what's the best way to characterize this? It's regarding a change in status of the
Seaboard Group.
relationship with Seaboard Group.
Yes, sir. And if I could, I'd ask you for two different separate votes. The first one, the main purpose again with these new documents are for tax implications that don't really apply to the city. However, the Seaboard Group members have come to us because Congress changed from having or requiring qualified settlement funds to environmental remedial trust, and that created some tax implications for the group members, but not for the city. And that's the purpose in these amendments. So the first one, I'd ask you to vote to give authority to the mayor to approve the ERT instead of moving from the QSF. And then the second one would be to appoint Terry Houck, the Public Service Director, for as the trustee for the he was for the QSF, and now that we're switching to an ERT format, that he continue in that role.
Okay, first we need to approve the motion to suspend the rules to add this item, and I made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Peters. I will call the roll. Please let me know how you vote. Councilman Holmes?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore?
Aye.
Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson has left the room momentarily, so he'll count as an aye, and the mayor votes aye. So the vote to suspend the rules is approved by a vote of 9-0. And then I will make the motion then to approve the the conversion with the Seaboard Group of our qualified settlement fund to a environmental remedial trust. Does that satisfy you, Madam Attorney?
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by the Mayor Pro Tem. And I will now, is there any discussion? Does everybody understand what we're doing? We received an email on this, and I think Joanne has explained it pretty well. It's essentially a tax structure change that doesn't affect us.
Exactly.
We don't pay taxes. And this year, I don't know if we'd have the money to pay them anyway. So I'll call the roll again. So this is on the motion to convert from the qualified settlement fund to the environmental remedial trust. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson, you just walked back in the room. We're voting. He votes aye. That's a man of faith right there. And the mayor votes aye, so that motion is approved. And next, I will make a motion to appoint Terry Houck as the city's trustee to the environmental remedial trust that we just voted to help create. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Jefferson. Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, then I will call the roll. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore?
Aye.
Councilman Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. So that motion is approved regarding Terry Howe's appointment as trustee. All right, so
Thank you very much.
so I believe we are now back to the minutes. Anyone have any changes to the minutes that are listed on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, then I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Johnson. I'll now call the roll. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'll now call the roll. Councilman Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. The minutes are approved by a vote of 9-0. Is there anything else anyone would like to discuss?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to,
Councilman Jefferson, you're recognized.
I would like to, in light of recent events and everything that's going on around the country, there's been a lot of discussions, and there's been protests and demonstrations, and there's been a collective message that talks about the importance of what went on and how we have to, in the moment, continue to speak to that. And Mr. Mayor, your letter I thought was so on point. I thought it was such a strong and resounding message about what's going on that I asked if you don't mind, and I don't know if any official motion needs to be made for this, but if you wouldn't mind reading that letter that you wrote right now, I think that would be very fitting, just because it's such a strong message. And I know our public right now is continuing to heal from this.
Okay, I'll be glad to do that. Give me just a minute to pull it up. Okay. This is a statement that I drafted earlier today and presented to council and asked that they consider endorsing it. And all 8 councilmen and Ms. Peters as well agreed to do that. So I'll read it. It can be entered into the record. It's also been publicly released to the media and also on social media. Begins, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Matthew 5:9. 1 week ago, our nation witnessed a blatant act of injustice in the death of an unarmed and nonviolent man, George Floyd, while in police custody in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Not an isolated incident, the death of George Floyd is another in a long history of acts of violence, injustice, inhumanity, and racism in our society. It is understandable that all people possessing love, compassion, fairness, and a sense of justice in their hearts and minds are rightfully disgusted, angered, and even vengeful as a result of this despicable act. Many are also tempted to blame all police, which undermines trust in those who risk their lives every day for our protection, and who equally condemn this act of brutality and stand together with us in seeking peace and justice. The primary responsibility of government is to protect the inalienable rights of our citizens. Our city respects the rights of people to peacefully gather and protest, freely speaking their rightful anger, sorrow, and demands for change. However, acts of violence, lawlessness, and destruction of property dishonor the memory of George Floyd, destroy the message being rightfully conveyed, and must be equally condemned and punished. Violence against the innocent is not a remedy for injustice. Our city will not tolerate and will do all that it can to prevent and will punish with all the power at its disposal acts of violence of this nature. The character of people, and by extension cities, nations, and states and nations, is revealed in times of crisis, especially those that shock our collective conscience and violate our ideals of life and liberty. It is during these times that we have to decide what kind of city we are. We must condemn the injustice we witnessed and dedicate ourselves to acknowledge and correct the inhumanity, racism, and brutality that made it possible. We can be a people and a city condemned to bitterness, hatred, and a desire for revenge, or we can commit ourselves to comprehend and understand that peacefully working together is the only path to the wisdom, respect, compassion, and love for one another that will result in justice and fair treatment for all who suffer from racism and inequality. We ask for your prayers for the family of George Floyd and for our city, state, and nation. These are confusing and difficult times. Our people are struggling to understand and respond, and many fear that the future may not include the justice and fair treatment that all good people so desperately seek. While the future may not bring about the end of violence, lawlessness, and disorder, the vast majority of our people, both white and people of color, want to live together in peace, improve the quality of our lives, and want justice and fairness for all human beings. It is during times like these that we are reminded that we still have much ground to travel, but we must be steadfast and dedicate ourselves to that end.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, if there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's motion made by the Mayor Pro Tem Williams. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Johnson. I will, if there's nothing else, I will now call the roll. Mr. Holmes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Peters?
Aye.
Councilman Moore?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Williams?
Aye.
Councilman Hudson?
Aye.
Councilman Jones?
Aye.
Councilman Jefferson?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. Meeting is now adjourned.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. You don't behave.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.